Dr. Jill Biden has made headlines this week ahead of the release of her new memoir titled View from the East Wing, which is out today. In it, Dr. Biden chronicles her tenure as First Lady, balancing her public duties with her personal career. She also offers her candid take and behind-the-scenes details of the turbulent final months of her husband Joe Biden's presidency. And Dr. Jill Biden joins us now. Dr. Biden, good morning. Congratulations on the book.
Well, thank you.
We were just talking about this balance of yours being a teacher, as you have been for most of your life.
40 years.
40 years
Yes.
as a teacher, and how you detail in this book that balance really showing itself in moments like teaching a Zoom class on the eve of your husband's inauguration in January of 2021, and then, of course, insisting on keeping your position even as First Lady. Why was all of that so important to you?
Well, you know, I had to be true to myself. I mean, I worked so hard to get my degrees, and took me 15 years to get 2 masters and a doctorate. And that was my life. That was my passion. That's who I am. And so when we got into the White House, I said, you know, I'm going to continue to teach. And they said, I don't know. Are you sure it's going to be really tough? And I said, I'm going to do it, so you better figure it out.
Were some of your own students surprised to see you still in classrooms?
You know, my students are just so cool. I mean, they just took it in their stride. You know, the first day when they come through and they had to put their book bag through the magnetometer, they were, you know, like, what? What are we doing this for? Because they didn't put my name on the roster. So they were surprised. But after that, it was like, okay, Dr. B. And then from then on, after the first day, I was always Dr. B.
So much to ask you about. You work, of course, out of the East Wing. The title of the book is View from the East Wing.
Yeah, remember that?
Well, I was going to ask you, just reading the title of the book, when you see these images, these photographs of the East Wing thoroughly demolished to make way for a ballroom that the president and some Republicans are now asking taxpayers to fund. When you look at these pictures of the place where you worked and where Rosalynn Carter set up her office, what do you think?
You know, I just think we've lost so much institutional memory. I loved the East Wing. I loved my offices in the East Wing. You know, when you come to visit the White House, that's where you enter, the East Wing. And the excitement that people would feel as they came in to take the picture with their families. And then what I did, I put the artwork of military children down the hallway and to show what was important to us, to our administration. And then I changed all the older men who were hanging on the wall to First Ladies, so that when families went through, they say, oh, there's Hillary, there's Laura. You know, they would recognize the women in the hallway. And I changed the whole tour. I mean, everything was, I'm a teacher. I know that you learn through 5 senses. And so everything was interactive, not just, you know, just a picture on the wall. Because when I got there and I saw kids walking through and then getting on their phone, I thought, no, we can't have that. This is the White House. They should love it. They should know what's in it, why it's there. And because there's just history. There's so much history, and that's what they should learn because, as you know, we don't have civics in school anymore, and they needed to learn that and to learn to love the history of our nation.
The demolition of the East Wing is kind of a physical manifestation of President Trump tearing down some of the legacy of government and specifically and tradition of your husband's administration. I'm thinking about, and I want to talk about the president's health in a moment, but about the cancer moonshot and how much money was invested in medical research and mRNA. And now we're hearing, despite some of the pullback and stripping away of money, all these incredible advances that continue to be made in spite of that. What is it like for you and the president to see, and that's just one example, so much of your legacy also being torn down?
You know, it's heartbreaking because I think Joe's whole mission was to make lives better for the American people. And that was his focus. And that's what he did. And so to see, you know, so many food programs cut or health programs cut, or like you're saying, the research, money for research, for women's health, something that I'm really interested in. And it's heartbreaking, a lot of the things that Joe did for the American people.
President Biden was diagnosed with stage 4 metastatic prostate cancer that, as you've said, has spread into his bones. How is his health as we sit here today?
Well, you know, cancer is really tough, and I would say he's doing okay. He's still making speeches. He's still on Amtrak a couple times a month, keeping a schedule. But cancer takes its toll. I know every family in America has been touched by cancer. So I think that people can relate to when I say, he gets tired a little more often. But I don't know. It's been tough.
I think some people will be surprised reading the book how early, at least you saw signs that something wasn't right. You say, including in the last year, you were in the White House, that he was getting up in the night too many times.
Yeah.
He did go in for his physical in February of 2024. Doctor cleared him of that. There's a scene in this book when you and the president later on the beach and a woman approaches you who's a doctor and said, how did his doctor not catch this? Do you ask yourself that question? Was no one at the time suspicious that he might have cancer in that moment?
Well, I think that the doctors, I felt that we did have amazing health care in the White House, but somehow this was missed. I think the doctors followed the guidelines and set forth by the American Urological Association. And so they didn't do the PSA. And consequently, we have stage 4 cancer that's in his bones.
And there's certainly many Americans who are wondering, though we know PSAs aren't often administered to men after their early 70s, why would the President of the United States have been an exception to that? The diagnosis came in May of 2025, and considering what the President's health is now, had he continued his reelection bid, had he been elected again, would he have been able to serve as president? Would he have had to resign?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
This, of course, there has been a lot of speculation, Dr. Biden, about the president's, ability to serve that second term. We know what happened, the debate that night in Atlanta in the summer of 2024. You write in the book about how your immediate reaction is you were fearful that something was wrong, that perhaps he even had a stroke. But publicly, of course, you said that he did well. You cheered him on that evening. What do you say to people who today wonder if you thought that a medical episode had happened? Did you recommend that he go? Did you recommend that he go to a doctor then?
Well, we had a whole team of doctors around us. I think most Americans may not know that we have a team of I have a team of doctors around me as First Lady. Joe had a team of doctors around him. So when I saw that, and I was frightened, I was scared to death to see that. But the doctors were there, and so. Right after he got off of stage. Let's face it, Joe knew that this was not a good performance. As we walked off the stage, he whispered to me, Jill, I'll put it nicely, screwed up, didn't I? And I said, yeah, Joe, you did. And so he knew. And then we got off the stage and, I went to get my stuff. He was checked out by the doctors. They said he's fine. We went on to do 3 more events that night. And Joe was like he always was. And so to me, as I look back, that was so inexplicable. To this day, it's just inexplicable.